On the banks of China's mighty Yangtze River, a temple has stood firm for half a millennium. It is built out of wood, stands 12 stories high, and clings to the cliff without the support of a single nail. The Shibaozhai Temple is a miraculous example of ancient engineering and religious devotion. Now under threat from a man-made wonder meant to harness the rising river below, it needs a modern miracle to survive another 500 years and remain one of the 7 wonders of China. The Shibaozhai Temple has outlived revolutions, survived corrosive weather, changes of government, and the ferocious power of an uncontrollable river. But now, this wonder of China is under threat from the Three Gorges Dam, the largest in the world. Once complete, there will be a dramatic and potentially devastating rise in the levels of the Yangtze.
The rise of the general water level is mainly because it is required for hydroelectricity generation in the Three Gorges Dam. The water level has been maintained at a certain level to satisfy the condition required for this output.
Work on the $30 billion dam began in 2006 to provide electricity and control the seasonal flooding of the river basin. It's a hugely ambitious project, a modern wonder of engineering. The result is a 375-mile-long reservoir to provide billions of hours of electricity. Three Gorges is 8 times more powerful than the Hoover Dam, and it will supply 364 million people. The Yangtze River is the 3rd biggest on Earth. 1 in 10 of the world's population live in its hinterland, most of them in swarming industrial cities. It's no wonder the river is considered China's lifeline. The river valley is changing fast. Chongqing, which is considered the largest urban trading port on the planet, bears all the marks of the old colliding with the new. The bustle of its streets contrasts starkly with the ancient and tranquil treasures that await downstream. Indeed, the banks of the Yangtze are lined with thousands of precious archaeological sites and priceless cultural relics. The Shibaozhai Temple is one of its crowning glories. Before the Shibaozhai Temple was built, worshippers had to risk their lives scaling the cliff sides in order to pay homage to statues of Buddha. It was bleak and dangerous.
At that time, the people were followers of Buddhism, and they built some statues of the Buddha and some small houses for worship up here. But during storms and windy days, the houses were destroyed, so they decided to build a temple here instead for worship and other Buddhist rituals.
So in the 17th century, local people built a 12-story pavilion as a way of getting worshippers safely up the cliff face. It was a permanent replacement for the makeshift shrines that were regularly blown off the cliff by storms.
Why did they decide to build a temple at a place like this? There are several reasons. First, it lies beside the golden flow of the Yangtze River. Secondly, Shibaozhai is an ancient town. Therefore, the population is very concentrated here. So they decided to build a temple so people can come for worship.
The design and building of the temple and the pagoda reaching up to it is a remarkable achievement which took great dedication and willpower from local people. The traces of their labors can still be seen today. It was a dangerous task. The artisans had to create something robust and stable as they gradually worked their way to 180 feet above the ground. In the end, they succeeded, allowing the devout to worship in safety at the top of a towering precipice. According to legend, the success was due to the wings of a bird.
There is an ancient myth told about the temple. It was said that the builders saw an eagle circling the cliff upwards. It did not fly up straight away, but circled the cliff. So the pavilion was supposed to be built circling upwards in the same way.
The spiraling of the eagle inspired the builders to design zigzagging staircases within the pavilion. These still take pilgrims the 12 floors up to the temple. They also needed a building that was weatherproof and could withstand nature's considerable wrath. They took a radical, seemingly impossible approach and decided to make the cliff itself part of the temple complex.
So the building of Shibao Zai has walls on 3 sides, while one side leans against the cliff. You can see that this whole pillar is not very straight. It has a certain degree of slanting. This one and this one are similar, leaning against the cliff. So the pushing forces of this building are all directed on the cliff wall.
Using a sheer cliff face as one side of a building is even more remarkable when you realize that local people did it themselves, relying on their own resources. For over 500 years, the temple's distinctive round windows have framed stunning views of the fertile banks of China's Yangtze River. They provide a glimpse of one of the world's fastest changing landscapes. In theory, the temple pavilion should have disappeared long ago. It has only 3 sides, it leans against a cliff, and there are no nails holding its 12 floors together. So how has it withstood half a millennium of howling wind and pounding rain? The secret lies in those unique windows, which are definitely not just for decoration.
This building has already 500 to 600 years of history. Why hasn't it slanted or collapsed? The main reason is the windows, which allow the wind to be absorbed during stormy weather so that the building remains unaffected. If it had been built closed, there would have existed a pushing force, which would then shake the building.
In its dominant position overlooking the Yangtze, the Shibaozhai Temple serves as a reminder to the new world of China of the wonders of its ancient world. Where the temple stands makes it an easy target for severe weather, but the brilliance of the builders and engineers made it seemingly immune to the corrosive forces of nature. What makes the Shibaozhai Temple's survival harder to explain is that it's made entirely of wood and stands firm, proud, and erect without the use of a single nail.
Shibao Zai began construction in the late Ming, early Qing dynasty. It has over 500 years of history. At that time, there were no iron nails. Therefore, in order for the building to be completed, the builders displayed much cleverness using a crisscross structure made from wood. The Chinese believe that wood is the best material. Wood is considered the best out of the 5 elements: stone, wood, water, fire, and earth. In the East, wood is considered to symbolize vitality and life, to be gentle and mild. These holes are left from the time when the builders were building Shibao Zai. They used these to tie strings to pull lumber and to fasten the workers' safety strings, leaving behind marks on the cliff.
The technique of interlocking beams, which holds the 12-story pavilion upright, is known as dugong. This technique was widely used in ancient Chinese architecture. Nowadays, it's often used for decoration rather than actual structural support.
The basic framework of the structure is in the columns. Even if there are no walls, the buildings will still be able to stand. The architecture concept of the past is very useful to our building techniques today. Our buildings today can also stand without walls. This Chinese technique is over 2,000 years old.
Nothing had been able to topple the temple. It remained firmly in position after centuries. The ancient statues that stood on the towering cliff were protected and worshipped for 500 years before disaster struck. It wasn't a torrential downpour or a flash flood that threatened the temple. It was Chairman Mao's Cultural Revolution that engulfed the country. For 10 years from 1965, religious buildings and artifacts were systematically destroyed by the Red Guards.
During the Great Cultural Revolution, the monks dispersed from the temple and the statues of Buddha were destroyed. Maoist Red Guards ordered local immigrants and the principals of local schools to oversee students destroying the original statues.
But the temple itself survived, and now it's a place of worship to a medley of gods. New statues were erected by local people after the Cultural Revolution. Most worshippers come to the temple to pay homage to Guangong, the Taoist god of war, and one of the most famous generals in Chinese history, who became a hero during the 2nd century. Worshipped for more than 1,500 years, Guangong represents loyalty and righteousness.
Guangong is also known as Guan Yunchang. All the past emperors consecrate him, because he is the highest of the deities in heaven. We worship him here too because the石寶寨temple pierces through the clouds, reaching right into glorious heaven.
Guangong is traditionally portrayed as a red-faced warrior with a long, lush beard. Although he is typically depicted carrying a sword in a fighting stance, at the Shibaozhai temple he's seated with a book in his hand instead of a weapon. This unusual depiction shows him as a military scholar armed with a Confucian classic. He's flanked by a team of 4 heavenly kings who must keep demons at bay from 4 directions. The heavenly king of the north carries an umbrella, which, when opened in battle, summons powerful storms to destroy his enemies. The heavenly king of the east is a helmeted warrior who defeats his enemies by playing his lute and summoning divine powers. The heavenly king of the south has the mightiest face and carries a sword with which to slay demons. And the heavenly king of the west holds a wish-fulfilling jewel in one hand and in the other a snake that is said to mount the clouds and ride the mists. In spite of the temple's original Buddhist roots, it now displays the characteristics of a Taoist shrine. The upwardly arched eaves of the roofs are common to Taoist temples, as are the row of figures perched on the edges. The entrance of Shibaozhai is flanked by a tiger and a dragon, 2 sacred creatures in the Taoist faith. The temple has a number of other features common to Taoism. There's another popular Taoist figure watching over the temple, Neza, the child trickster. Always depicted as a youth, Neza is often seen flying with a wheel of fire under each foot for speedy travel, and 2 weapons he holds above his head, a cosmic ring and a spear. A popular character in Chinese mythology, Neza is a Taoist immortal and a legendary warrior whose body and mind always remain childlike. But these brightly painted figures are not the only recent additions to the temple. In a pond in a courtyard at the temple's summit, there lay a giant gray-black creature about 2.5 feet long, in the shape of a flattened spoon.
The giant salamander is our country's first great protected animal. In 1980, a fisherman captured it from the Yangtze River and gave it to us. It has lived here for 28 years.
It only moves when driven by hunger to snatch at one of the tiddlers. This lethargy has led to a local saying, as lazy as the salamander in the temple. But even if it does little else, the salamander is revered as a sacred creature that brings the temple good fortune. It's a commodity much in demand as the temple faces the future with uncertainty. Farmers in this area are amongst the lucky ones, or at least they have been until now. They are grateful for what they have, in particular, an abundance of rice. But there's a legend from the temple's past that reminds them it wasn't always so.
In the temple's early days, there was a hole in the rock wall where each day enough rice would pour out to feed all of the monks staying there. No one questioned this miraculous daily occurrence until one day, a greedy monk decided to make the hole bigger in an attempt to get more rice. He chipped away at the hole, but when he was finished, his greedy act had made the rice disappear forever, leaving only the empty hole as a reminder of his folly.
The people of the Yangtze have always passed on life's lessons through a wealth of legends like this one, from generation to generation. These tales have served them well and guided them through a simple but contented life. So too has the Yangtze Basin itself. Farmers like Qin Boting have farmed these fields for thousands of years, tilled its fertile plains, fished its deep pools, and navigated its channels, reaping its benefits as China's main artery of trade. And all in the shadow of the Shibaozhai Temple. It has allowed him and his ancestors to live their lives under the protection of Guangong and his army of gods enshrined at the top of the cliff. Qin Boting can trace his family's spiritual roots to the temple where his ancestors worshipped.
My grandparents, my great-grandparents all went to the temple for worship. We used to play in the temple when we were children, climbing around, and it was very fun. So you see that temple has a long history, and it's a very good temple.
However, Qin Boting's life is about to be turned upside down. By 2009, his fields, his house, and those of his fellow farmers will be completely swamped by the waters of the Yangtze. The building of the dam means levels will rise by as much as 300 feet, changing the Yangtze Valley forever. Over 1 million people have to be relocated. Vast areas of farmlands will be submerged.
Yes, we moved up. The country has already settled our houses for us. Our houses, our food, our clothes. We used to live in mud houses. Now we live in brick houses.
All along the flood basin, farmers like Qin Boting have had to uproot their entire families and livelihoods for drier lands.
The rising of the water level is to save the country, so we sacrifice our small families to benefit the country.
At least the farmers can uproot their lives, pack up their belongings, and leave their land behind. The same cannot be said for some 1,300 cultural sites that face imminent destruction from the rising water levels. One of these is the Shibaozhai Temple.
The water level is going to reach 175 meters. If Shibaozhai is not protected, there will be water coming in from the four sides, and it will be corroded by the water. The corrosion of water will make the base unstable, which will lead to the eventual collapse of the entire Shibaozhai temple. The structure of Shibaozhai is made out of crack in its lower part and precipice on top. If we do not perform any protection, in the long term, the crack will turn into sulfur stone. If it turns into sulfur stone, it will induce the entire hill to collapse. This will cause our cultural relic of a few hundred years to be destroyed.
If the water levels rise 300 feet, as predicted, the Yangtze would reach the first floor of the Shibaozhai temple.
Wood structures cannot show any signs of sinking. Once they do, they will collapse. Therefore, the base of the foundation must be very sturdy and unchanging.
Engineers say relocating the wooden structure is impossible because it's embedded in the cliff by its unique construction. If it remains unprotected, the entire building, as well as the cliff it leans on, will come tumbling down. It's now a race against time to save the Shibaozhai temple, but the Chinese government has a radical and ambitious solution. A 600-foot-high, 33-foot-thick concrete dike that will protect the temple in a specially designed dry well. The plan is part of a $125 million program to save a huge chunk of China's precious past from the threat of the world's largest hydroelectric project. When it's completed, the dike will surround the temple and the cliff while the river surges around the walls. The temple's base will be below the actual water level, but the entire building will remain miraculously dry. This solution is something of a man-made miracle, adding a new twist in the tale of the temple's survival over the past 500 years. The means of its protection may itself become a wonder of modern China.
So we make use of the bridge and also a corridor to enter the body of our cultural relic, for the convenience of sightseeing and for scholars to perform archaeological inspection.
So as well as protecting the temple, the dike will provide easier access for pilgrims and tourists. It's almost as if the story of Shibaozhai has come full circle from when worshippers built the red-painted pavilion 500 years ago to reach the temple.
In the future, the tourism will bloom. Look at that bridge. The view looks even better than before. There's water all around it, and it is so pleasing to the eye. There will be more tourists coming here in the future.
Transformed from an ancient treasure to a 21st century marvel, the Shibaozhai Temple is on the sharp end of China's headlong rush to modernize. 500 years ago, local people built a temple dedicated to their gods. Now, the dedicated pursuit of progress threatens its survival. But it looks like the ingenuity of modern builders will save this wonder of China for another 500 years.